The Indian government has been talking and doing a lot to make the Indian rupee an international currency. Now, what's the meaning of internationalizing the rupee? Basically, it means that we pay for imports in rupees and foreigners pay us for our exports in rupees. But more important, any two countries outside India, like say Brazil buying from Australia, can make the payment in rupees like they now do in dollars. That's what internationalizing means. Now, why are we suddenly harboring these ambitions? One reason is the growing realization that India will be the third largest economy by probably the end of this decade, and the rupee deserves to be an international currency. However, the bigger reason is the push factor. The sanctions against Russian entities and the impounding of Russian dollar reserves by the United States has rattled emerging markets like India, who hold dollar reserves, a great deal of them. They realize that the West can always weaponize the dollar. A third reason is technology. Technology has arrived, so to speak. More central banks are issuing or will issue digital currencies, or what you call CBDCs, and that can be used for making bilateral payments without an intervening dollar or euro. Just deduct from the RBI CBDC account and credit it to, say, the Central Bank of UAE. Also, it is now possible to connect India's UPI to the payment systems of other countries for small cross-border retail payments. So, you can give pocket money to your daughter studying in Singapore via UPI plus the payment system of Singapore. Now, what are the advantages if rupee is the medium for all import-export payments? Most importantly, it becomes cheaper for the Indian counterpart because Indian buyers and sellers don't have to hedge. Today, when importers have to pay in dollars for, say, semiconductor chips, they have to pay the dollar value plus a cost for booking the dollar for use at a later date. If the medium of payment is rupee, then this hedging cost can be avoided altogether, and sometimes it can be 6% of the bill. Also, that will help Indians make more profit. Secondly, the most important factor, others like the United States can't suddenly de-recognize our forex reserves because they don't like our foreign policy. Indeed, we won't even need to accumulate so much reserves. Another feature of an international currency is it is accumulated as reserves by other countries. We always worry we may run out of dollars to pay for crude oil, so the Reserve Bank accumulates at least 9 to 10 months worth of imports by way of dollar reserves. Now, if transactions happen in rupees, others have to accumulate rupees, which they may temporarily invest in Indian government bonds. So it becomes cheaper to fund our deficit. All fine, but what factors will make us a global currency? First, we have to have a much larger share in global trade. Right now, we have just 1.8% share in global goods exports. In global services exports, we have a slightly better share of 4%. But that's not big enough to compel our counterparties to accept rupees. Secondly, Indian rupee is seen as secularly depreciating or always a falling currency. Why would anyone accept rupee payments and hold rupees if there is a fear that its value will fall tomorrow, that it will buy less in the future? Actually, India's Reserve Bank actively buys dollars to keep the rupee cheap versus the dollar so that our exports benefit. Also, if others accept rupees for imports, they will want to hedge it. But India's foreign exchange markets are not so deep. Look how undertraded the rupee is. Just look at this table. The US dollar accounts for 88% of all foreign exchange market trades in the world. Indian rupee's market share is just 2%. Even our own imports and exports are denominated in dollars, 90% of it. So, what's the Reserve Bank and the government's game plan? First, let us understand that internationalizing the rupee is a distant goal. As Professor Panagaria, who has studied this subject, says, we must concentrate on first a stable currency which requires controlled macros, a controlled fiscal and current account deficits and inflation, so people trust our economy and our currency. The most important aim should be high growth and much more share of the export market, so countries see it beneficial to hold our rupees with which they can pay for exports. China used this strategy very successfully in Southeast Asia, thus allowing netting of payments. India has been pursuing more FTAs, free trade agreements, for this purpose and is trying to solicit capital flows on the other hand in terms of FDI. But India currently has capital controls. We don't sell government bonds in dollars. Even foreigners buying Indian rupee government bonds can't go beyond 6% of outstanding government securities. We are not part of the bond indexes because of tax issues. We need to see how and whether to liberalize all these controls. So, what should the first steps be needed for internationalizing the rupee? An Reserve Bank of India committee has recommended the following. 1. First, offer SOPs to exporters who settle in rupees. 2. Make it easier for foreigners to hold rupee accounts in India and in offshore accounts. 3. Sign with more countries for invoicing, settlement and payment in rupee or their local currencies. Such signing up actually is only publicity. Paying for exports and imports in rupees were always allowed, but signing a pact coaxes people to try this arrangement. It makes it's a bit of a publicity effort. Number 4, make efforts to enable rupee as an additional settlement currency in existing multilateral mechanisms such as the ACU or the Asian Clearing Union. 5. Integrate Indian payment systems with other countries for cross-border transactions. The UPI agreements. Number 6. Strengthen financial markets via a global 24/5 rupee market. The dollar's hegemony isn't going away easily, but we don't have to think global as a first step. Let the first steps be merely to ensure more bilateral trades are in rupee or in the currency of the country with which we are trading. Those must be the right first steps.